She was born in the United States. Her parents are Panamanian. She goes back at least once a year. She cooks the food, plays the music, and speaks the language in her house. She has done everything right. Yet, not too long ago, her 4-year-old looked at her and said, "Can you speak regular?" That is today's conversation. I'm Tami D. Garcia, and this is Roots Renewed, where we explore who we are, where we come from, and how we reconnect. I grew up disconnected from my Dominican and Jamaican heritage, and as an adult, I chose to reconnect. That journey taught me that reconnection is not something that happens once, it's something that you have to keep choosing over and over again, especially when you are raising children in a world that does not know your culture and was never taught to ask about it. Jessica Fisher Golden has been choosing it every day. Jessica is a health and wellness content creator, podcast host, and mother of two based in the Washington, D.C. area. She was born in the United States and has spent her entire life doing what her parents did for her, making sure the culture stays alive in her home, in her kitchen, in her children's wardrobes, and in the language they hear every morning. Jessica is also one of my people. She came to my book launch. I have been on her podcast, and I have been waiting to have this conversation with her for a very long time. Jessica, welcome to Roots Renewed.
Welcome. I'm excited to be here.
So glad to finally have you here. Let's get started. So, when you think about who you are culturally, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind for me is, as you stated, I was born here, but you cannot tell me I am not Panamanian. I travel there often. I still have a large amount of my family that lives there, and my parents live there actually. So you cannot tell me I'm not Panamanian. We have flags all about. We, as you mentioned, as far as the speaking the language, native is Spanish for us. And that's what I identify as, plain and simple. I live in America, but I'm Panamanian.
And what does being Panamanian mean for you?
It means that I have a culture to uphold. It means that I come from a people who have been through some very interesting times. I come from a culture that is rooted in respect, rooted in keeping family traditions, and rooted in love.
Being Panamanian, yet growing up in New York, how did you carry that culture? How did your family carry the culture? Because many people I've spoken with, they talk about how they were one thing at home and then something else in the streets.
For me, my both my parents are Panamanian. So what that looks like is the vast majority of my family and close family friends are all Panamanian. So there was not they had to bring the culture. It literally was just around. Luckily for us, I have an uncle who, when he immigrated here, he bought a lot of property in New York. And what he did was anytime somebody came to Brooklyn, which is where we were raised and where we were brought into the country and stayed, we lived in one of his houses to this day. So a lot of that looked like I lived on this block and my aunt lived on that block, and she had a two family. So we had my other aunt upstairs, and I had one of my paternal uncles behind. So it was always around. It was nothing that was forced or it just was what it was, to the point about being one thing at home versus like when we're out in the streets. I didn't really experience that when I was living in New York City because there were so many different cultures. And I was never asked the questions that I got asked after we left Brooklyn, which were questions like, why do your parents talk like that? They sound like they're Jamaican, but they speak Spanish. Or you're Black, so how do you speak Spanish? That means you're not Black. All this confusion that I never had to deal with growing up until I left the comfort, if you will, of Brooklyn. So after we left, that's truly when I experienced what you were talking about, which is at home, we're one way, but then when we go to school, so like high school, for example, there were not many people of color at the school that I went to. We were in the suburbs and it was not friendly towards diversity. So I spoke differently.
This was the suburbs of New York?
No, this is the suburbs of Northern Virginia. So when it wasn't that there were not people, I like if I didn't see your parents or a parent, I wouldn't even know like, oh wow, I just saw you were white. Okay. I had no idea because nobody sounded like me. And I'm coming from a place where I'm thinking, well, I know what East Indians who have Grenadian roots look like, or Guyanese roots, and all these different shades and hues and different accents. And when I come here, it's like none of that. It is everybody talks very nasally, everybody just talks the same. And me coming in at that point of my life as a young, blossoming young girl, you want to be accepted, and you're finding out all these new things, and you're trying to assimilate because you don't really want to step out or be too out there at that point of my life. So I just thought everybody talked the same, everybody dressed the same, and it was very isolating. So when I got home, it was different. I mean, it was only myself and my immediate nuclear family, which were very small. But then we go back to Brooklyn very, very often. So I never felt like I longed for it because I had it. But then when we go to school, ooh, wake up call,
Right.
wake up call.
And your parents were very intentional about how they raised you and keeping you connected to your Panamanian roots?
Funny thing is, I never realized it until recent times. So there's certain traditions that we upheld. I remember there's a big thing about Sunday dinner, and not the traditional you sit down and eat Sunday dinner together, but we don't buy food out in the streets on Sundays. You eat a home cooked meal. The artwork, the music is playing. Because my parents had a lot of friends who are Panamanian as well, we would go to festivities, birthday parties, things of that nature. So I'm always hearing the culture. I'm always around the culture. I'm always hearing the language, the accent, the colloquialism. Anytime somebody has a birthday, somebody's going to bust out a pollera and there's going to be dancers and performances. It seemed very normal for me, but it wasn't until recent time that I realized, like, wow, this was not just by happenstance. This is very intentional. They made it a point that we go back during different points of the year. We'll go back for Christmas to experience Christmas there, or we'll go back for Carnival, or we'll go back for just a summer vacation, or a reunion or something. It was a norm.
I remember you saying when you went back to Panama, it didn't feel like a visit. It felt like you were returning.
Yes, yes. For example, if I go to a hotel, there's like a whole ritual I have. We gotta sanitize everything and make sure there's no bacteria. You gotta open up the curtains, da, 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 and do all these things to get acclimated. It's very much like this when I go back. My room is here, and it's just very much like you just go right into everybody speaks the language. I speak the language, so I just go right back into it. It's not like, okay, now I have to put on this hat because I'm here. I am what you see today. This is how I navigate in the world when I'm there. That's what it looks like for me.
How does it feel to go back into the neighborhood and to see people that you know and just to do life?
So let me tell you this.
Yeah.
Whenever we go, usually there's some type of like, it's not called a welcome party, but usually my parents will host something where a lot of the family is able to attend because everybody doesn't live in the same part of the country. They may host one big event or multiple events, or people will invite you to come. And then they cook up and they want you to come and spend time. I get to eat great. I get to see smiling faces, warm embraces, all these wonderful things. I feel very relaxed. It's great. It's really, really great.
How does it feel when you return back to Washington, D.C. from
Bum,
Panama?
bum, bum. So it's quite the contrary. So coming back, it's that reality check. Like it's not sunshine and paradise. You're returning back to school and or work. The temperature here is very different, and I mean the climate, and I mean the cultural customs here is very different. That's when I got to put that hat on. Now I'm back here. Like for example, I was always raised that when we go into any public or official building, we have to wear long pants. Like there's a certain way you dress, right? Here, it's very laissez-faire. You go into the bank on your phone. You don't do that there. So coming back here, it's just not as warm and friendly. It's not that warm, fuzzy feeling. Also the doom and gloom of like, man, I gotta go back to work, man, or I gotta go back to school, or I gotta go deal with this nonsense, fill in the blank, whatever your nonsense is, because you just came off a vacation, right? Everything was sunny and great, and people were welcoming you, and you had the sunshine on your skin, and it was a wonderful experience, and you saw family and good friends, and you got to just drop your shoulders. But now we're back, and I literally can just feel it ticking, ticking, ticking back up as I come through the airport.
Understands, or as we say, overstands.
Yes, yes.
I get that. So your parents were very intentional, and now you're carrying that intentionality on to your children, the vacations, all the things. How do they handle that? Tell me about that.
We make it back there at the very least once a year, usually during the summertime. But I want them to get as much as of a good time while they're there. A couple of weeks ago, my son was saying, "Yeah, when we go to Panama, yeah, we're going to do this." And it's very much like he just knows it's going to happen. I've never said to them, "We're going to go every year. I need you to connect with your culture." Like, this is what we do. So they enjoy it. Recently, my brother took his family, he has 3 children, and they went for the first time. And my nephew called my son on FaceTime and he says, "Guess where I'm at?" He's like, "Where?" And he tells him, "I'm with grandma and grandpa. I'm in Panama." And he says, "Really? Well, what did you do?" Just I should have prefaced it, but this is a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old having a conversation. "Well, what have you done so far?" This is what my son says to his big cousin. "Well, we went to the beach and this resort, and which resort did you go to?" No lie. And I'm just listening to this big man conversation with these little people like, what is this? So that warmed my heart because they were excited to be there. My nieces and my nephew, my son is like he's the expert. Like, well, which resort did you go to? Because he's experienced some of them. So they love it. My daughter, who's 4, this very sweet young lady, she says to me, "Why don't you speak regular?" And what she's talking about is I speak Spanish in the home predominantly, or we do Spanglish, right? This is just what I've always done. My children did attend a Spanish immersion school for many years. Unfortunately for my daughter, she only got a year, and now they're in a new school, full immersion. She comes home, she speaks it way more than my son does. And now in this new school with these new friends, nobody speaks Spanish. This school is predominantly white. It's in a more affluent area of Washington, D.C. And that's what she said to me one day. Why don't you speak regular? And when I tell you that crushed my soul. Now I knew what she was talking about, but, "Well, what do you mean speak regular?" She was like, "I don't understand what you're saying," with all the attitude and everything. I said, "Yes, you do understand what I'm saying because I asked you to pick something up and she picked it up." But in her sass, she says, "Can you speak to me regular?" She recently brought this up again just this week. She said the same thing. So now we're going to deep dive on that. And we're going to have a conversation. "Well, what do you mean to be regular? Because this is regular for me. This is regular for grandma and grandpa. This is regular for all the aunties and the big cousins. This is regular." We tend to go back and forth, right? Meaning we'll speak what I call Spanglish. We do a lot of that. And I said, "This is normal." And she goes, "Well, none of my friends speak like that." And I said, "Well, I don't give two biscuits what your friends do. This is what I do. This is what grandma and grandpa, this is what you do." And she paused, and we'll see what happens, in the near future.
I can't wait to hear that. Well, how does your son handle it? And was he around when she said that?
He wasn't around, when she said this. Oh, it's very similar to my upbringing in the sense that my parents would speak to me in Spanish, and I would always respond in English, always. I come to learn that this is very common for first generation, even amongst, like, a lot of my Puerto Rican friends, a lot of my Dominican friends, the first generation, we respond. I don't know what that's about. So my son does the same. If I give him a command, he'll do the command. Sometimes he'll see no, but no is no either way, either language. But when somebody speaks to him in Spanish and we're not in the home, he does respond in Spanish, but he doesn't respond often with me, which I think it's very similar to how I grew up. And I never told him that.
They're no longer in bilingual schools, so do they get the questions? Do they feel differently about who they are? Because now they're experiencing being one way at home and then another way outside of the home.
We have not had that conversation. This particular school is quite busy. And I love that because I take the opportunity to chaperone a lot of events and I volunteer. So once or twice I've had some kids ask me questions. There was a international light or something similar to that they had, and I wore something called a pollera, and we have different variations of pollera, but I wore the Congo one or the one from the African diaspora, right? And I wore that one and I made a special drink that we made called Syra. So I had a lot of questions about that. And what was interesting to me was my son was very quiet. The day after, he introduced me to one of his friends. And he says, "Oh, this is my friend. He's in my class. He wants to talk to you about the Syra." So I'm talking to the 7-year old about, like, "Hi, what do you want to know?" So I don't really know how they interact with their peers in school. I've not had them say anything to me about any disparaging remarks or any positive remarks for that matter. Mom is the word when it comes to talking about school. They don't really say too much, and I ask a lot of questions. I probe with different types of questions, and I get nothingness about or specifically about what you're asking, like,
Oh,
"How come your mother speaks this way?" Or like, that hasn't come up yet.
what about for yourself? How does it feel leaving New York, going someplace where now you have to explain yourself? I and I ask this because I know for myself, being an Afro-Latina, and people say, "You're Dominican? You don't look Dominican." Like, well, how many Dominicans do you know? Because when I'm in DR, I look like everyone there. I look like my family. So, how do you know that? And I even encounter that with my daughter. My daughter is Ethiopian, as you know, and there have been some people that have said to me, she doesn't look Ethiopian. I said, there are 80 something tribes from Ethiopia. She absolutely looks Ethiopian because that's what she is. So I find it interesting that people who really don't know judge who you are.
I love that you brought up the point of, so how many Dominicans do you know? Because that was the same experience I had when I left. Panama is a very small country. There's like just north of 4 million people in the country. It's not a big place. And I think that what tends to happen is when you are not somebody who is, I'm not even going to say well versed, but I'll say if you're somebody who you just really don't know a lot or don't care to know a lot or question things, you're going to go based off of what you see on in media, TV, social media, you know, what have you, movies or what have you, and you're making your decisions based off of what somebody is feeding you as opposed to seeking the information. So for me, I've never had to answer these questions until I left. How come you're black and you can speak Spanish? How come your hair's not straight? How come? How? And it's just like, because of my age at the time, and I was in this space where like I want to assimilate. I don't want to stand out because that was at the time that was not like the cool thing. So I hit a lot of that. Like I'm not as forward as I am now about my heritage and my culture. Then if you knew my parents, you would hear them talk and you would hear the accent or you see their vehicle and see some flag hanging off the rearview mirror. But you wouldn't know, not from me, that wasn't my personality. So it was a huge, difficult transition for me. It was a very difficult transition for me, not only because there was a lot of explaining, there was a lot of isolating moments.
I know your people are Panamanian, but they're more than that.
Oh yeah.
It's the history, and I know you're very well versed in that. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, on my maternal side, we have, Barbadian roots. I don't know one thing about Barbados. I've never been. I know that my maternal grandfather comes from there, but they raised their children there. And then on my paternal side, I know that my grandparents are Jamaican. The interesting thing is that so every most of them came to help build canal and just planted and stayed, and that's it. You cannot tell my parents that they're not Panamanian. There's no, that's all they know. I think a couple of family members have traveled back to Jamaica on my paternal side to try to see if they could find, some family. But realistically, the roots are in Panama. That's where we have a lot of the information. That's the only place we would go to is Panama to have our family reunions. So culturally, for me and many other Panamanians, because many Panamanians look like me and many don't look like me. There are South Asians, there are East Indians, there's a huge Jewish population that's there. There's African diaspora that can be found there. There's white Panamanians there too. So it's not like it's similar here in the United States, but at the end of the day, you claim yourself to be Panamanian. That's what it is. That's it.
I remember you spoke about a woman and
Yes.
she represented like a dying part of the community with the maybe the knowledge of the language. Can you explain that?
Yes, this wonderful woman, she's a peer of my parents. When I tell you this lady embodies the epitome of literally my childhood, like my grandmother's voice, my aunts and uncles, their mannerisms. She carries the accents. And the Panamanians who are from the descendants of like Bayesian and Barbadian and Jamaican, they have a very specific way that they speak English. It's very specific to the untrained ear. Oh, they sound like they're Jamaicans. But she speaks in that patois. It's very nostalgic. Her personality, just over the top, bright colored, loud. I mean, hello. Like, she is a damn good cook. And she takes pride in that, which is something that my father oftentimes talks about. Like, oh, back in my time, it was like a war. Who makes the best bun and who makes the best escovitch fish and who makes the best this and this and that. And he oftentimes talk about it's a dying culture because the way my grandmother or the way my sister used to make this present day, they're not making it the same. Or people who come from a different, we'll say different ethnicity group in Panama will try to mimic like the Caribbean influence Panamanian style food and they leave out certain ingredients or they mix in different, it just tastes different. So with this lady, she is grinding corn in a corn grinder. Like one of my one of my uncle's wives. I very vividly remember her doing that to make tamales. Just like that's what I mean when I say that she's, she's part of this dying breed. I'm so glad and so grateful for you because after we had our conversation, I reached out to her
Mm.
and I asked her, "Do you know anybody that dances typical?" So for us, you get your children into these dance groups and they learn how to dance the typical like folk traditional dance, the different types of traditional dances. So I reached out to her and she gave me the gentleman's number. And as you would have it, that same weekend I reached out to her, we were wrapping up spring break and I did not know how much of a dancer my little 4-year-old is. This child was dance machine all every time a beat dropped. So I said, "You know what? We're gonna get her to dance typical." And because with my child's personality, she likes big flowy skirts and dresses. And I said, "Thank you, Tammy D," because I would have never thought like, let me call her because I know she knows somebody and gave me the phone number. So thank
I
you, Tammy. Thank you
I
very much.
love
Thank you
to
very much. Yes.
I love to hear that. Please, when she has a showcase or something, send me a video.
I definitely will. I'm excited for her.
Does everyone in your family speak Spanish, and are they connected to the culture, your heritage, the way that you are?
For the majority, I would say yes. Some of my cousins born in Panama and came here, and then there are less that are like me who were born here. The ones who were born there, I would say probably 90% of them speak Spanish. At the very least, they're gonna understand it. The generation that I'm in that were actually born here, that's a little different because I think they understand it. I think oftentimes you go to their homes, you may see certain artifacts or things that I would know to be Panamanian such and such, but maybe somebody who's coming to visit wouldn't necessarily know. It just depends on where that person is in their life and where they live, because I think that makes a difference as well.
I have friends that are Panamanian and even born in Panama, but once they came to the US, they no longer speak the language, they haven't returned, they don't know much of the history anymore, and I can see the hurt
Mhm.
that they carry. How do you feel about that? And what would you say to them, or anyone for that matter that's disconnected and looking for a way to reconnect or not sure if they can reconnect?
I will always say there is no time like the present. So if you feel disconnected, there we are nothing but AI search away from learning and getting information. There are wonderful people like you who offer the experience where you have the opportunity to get in touch with your roots. If you have living members in your family that you can reach out to, use them as a source. If you have the resources and you have the opportunity, go back to wherever this homeland is and get your feet on the ground. Like, feel what it feels like to be there. If you can't do that, you can look at YouTube. There are so many videos of people visiting all these different countries in this day and age. It's very limiting to say that you can't find something out or that you can't seek help because we have so much information now than we did before. So if you didn't learn Spanish, and that's a big, that's a huge thing for that person that you're speaking about, one of your friends. I have a lot of Puerto Rican friends who their parents only speak to them in Spanish and they only respond in English. I do too. I trip over my words. I have a lot more confidence in English for sure. But I try with my little broken Spanish. I don't give two biscuits, but that's my confidence. Like I'll try. I don't have a problem going up to a native speaker and speaking to them and them responding to me in English. So if you feel that you want to learn it, take life by the horns and make it happen.
In my work, I talk about heritage fragments. Heritage fragments are those things that could be tangible or intangible that connect you to your culture. And they're different for everyone. It could be the food, music, a saying. It could be a piece of jewelry. For you, what is one heritage fragment that you think about that connects you to who you are and where you come from?
And for me, it's the flag. And the reason being, it was very common for everybody to have like a flag hanging from your rearview mirror, right? And that's like a nostalgia thing for me, right? Just especially in the 90s, like driving around in Brooklyn or even in just New York City in general or metropolitan city, like looking at people's flags and like recognizing it immediately. I don't have to see what the words are, that identify the country. I know the stars, I know the color blocks, like I know it. I can just think about it, just different, different stages of my life, living in different places, living in different homes. The flag always remained. Even in my home, we have 4 at the front door. Don't ask me why, but we have big ones. We have little handheld ones. Of course, I have my flag hanging, in my off of my rearview mirror. That it speaks so prominently to me, and I know it's just literally this little flag that hangs from the, rearview mirror, but for me, it's just the epitome of my upbringing, the foods we eat, just all the things that is very nostalgic to me is the flag.
I remember back in the day when everybody started hanging flags from their rearview mirrors. Some people would have 1 flag. I had 2 flags. And people had just flags hanging all around. Uh, and I think you just reminded me of the flag. I'm gonna get a flag or some flags.
I love it. I love it.
For someone listening to this and they're raising children away from their culture, what is one thing that you would tell them to do? One step that they can take to begin getting them reconnected to their culture?
I would nicely recommend, gently recommend that you get your little people, or as I call them, get your littles involved in their culture. Not only does it help for them to identify who they are, but also it gives them a sense of pride. If you don't know a lot about your roots or where you come from or the land that you come from, I would highly encourage you to research it and then share the things. Don't just keep that with you. Talk about it because as you begin to develop more knowledge and it might make little connections appear for you that you never thought about. You could do the same thing for your littles. It can open up questions for them. Maybe they want to go see this place. As I said earlier, my brother took his family and after they left, I spoke with my father and he was saying, I don't know why my grandkids, and he's talking about my brother's children, why they were just like bright eyed when they got here and they just had such a good time. He was like, I don't know what that's about because they've never been here. And I said, well, think about this. This is like this mystical place that they've heard of, right? They know that their grandparents lived there. They FaceTimed you or had a video chat or something so they can kind of hear the birds in the background or hear some other animals in the neighborhood or they may see something, right? And it's just like, wow, what is this place that I know exists but I've never been? So it's that inquisitiveness where it's rooted in positivity because they love their grandparents and it's like they're happiest when they're there. Sun is on their skin and they hear stories from their auntie, they hear stories from their father and some of our other family members about fun that we have, the type of food and things of that nature. And it's like, I really want to go. So now they have the opportunity and there you have it. And my father's just like, I didn't think about it that way. I said, yeah, because what other connection would they have if they've never been other than through the stories that they've received when they on a video call with you guys. It's a whole different experience than just reading something on a screen or reading something in a textbook. Like you actually hear the sounds real time while you're there, smell the different aromas, whether that's food or somebody's, cologne or perfume or going into a church because that is a very Catholic country. So certain times you go in, there's certain things that are being burned and things of that nature. Like your senses are ignited by these things, and these are things that we hold on to. And even later, later on in our life, where you just hold on to these things because you remember how it made you feel, or what you saw, or it touched those senses.
What are you intentionally preserving or passing on for future generations?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I do. I am a huge advocate for documenting. And what I mean by that is I like video documenting. So you asked earlier about when my daughter does dance or do something. Oh, I definitely will. Because I think that to see it, at least that ignites one of your senses, even if you can't be there. I am a self proclaimed storyteller. So I interview some of my elders, and that's available for anybody in my family who's interested. Um, outside of taking my children there, the hope is that they will continue to develop that connection, that they will go off on their own and visit, and then hopefully take their children with them. So it'll just continue that it's okay to travel. We're bigger than just the block that we grew up on, plain and simple. We all started from somewhere where we're not from this block that you live on today, or this parish that you come from. We're all connected, and we're bigger than where we are right now in this moment.
Jessica, my final question is, what does it mean to you that this space exists? A space for heritage reconnection, a space to tell your stories and share with the world.
I think this is paramount. I was sharing with Tammy D earlier today that I saw one of the other people that you had on the show talk about her experience, and it's very different than mine's, right? Very different culture. And I think to have the opportunity to not only tell your story from your vantage point, but to hear from others. Because what that ultimately does is it bridges these gaps that we think exist. I might not look like you. I may not come from the side of the world that you come from, but there are certain things that we share that are just true to who we are. We both love our grandma's whatever she makes. It might not be the exact same food, but it ignites that same feeling. Or you very much remember what it felt like the first time that you met with an elder in your family, and they're only speaking to you in this language, and you're just trying to keep up with them. Just these little nuances that you may experience with having to shape shift, as I call it, or code switching, as they call it, where you have to be one way in a certain environment, and then you feel that you have to switch to assimilate in another one where everybody does not share your cultural identity, or you don't think would be open to receiving it. You'd be surprised how the world is not as huge as we think it is. It's really not. We do share a lot of the same experiences, although it may be shrouded in a different language. But we do share a lot of the same connections with our families and our roots. So I think this is an awesome and phenomenal thing that you're doing here. I think this is awesome to have the opportunity to just share this with our offspring and even others who are not even related to me. Like,
Jessica, thank you so much for sitting with me today and sharing your stories and your life with me, and for just doing the work that you do and being so intentional about carrying your heritage. Now, your children may not know it today about the intentionality and the things that you're doing for them and future generations, but they will.